New office? Who dis? One of my favourite things to do in the world is to take a tiny little camera into a gig and see what photos I can get. Generally speaking, in the UK, as long as your camera doesn't have an interchangeable lens, you're usually let in with it. But smaller the better is my theory. So I've been using the Lumix LX15, the Canon PowerShot V1, and more recently the Fujifilm X70. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how I edit these images and get them clean, even if the sensor is 10 years old and tiny. I'm going to be using DXO Photolab 9, and DXO are the kind sponsor of this video, but also throughout this video I'm going to give you some top tips if you'd like to smuggle in a tiny camera and get some interesting concert photography yourself. The biggest leap in quality that my personal images took for this genre is when I realised that I'm not going to get the best shots of the night. I'm just not, because most of the time I'm not the main photographer. I'm not at the pit. I'm not 3 inches away from the singer. I'm in the crowd and I'm further back and I'm using older equipment. I would personally recommend not using zoom lenses and not trying to get close-ups of the people on stage, not unless you're very, very close. The reason being is there's always going to be someone professional doing that, and they're going to get those shots of the night and we can see them. What we have that's unique to our perspective is the atmosphere. So I would say use a slightly wider lens and try and get the crowd in, try and get in the atmosphere. And if a hand gets in the way or someone's head or someone's foot, it really doesn't matter. It all adds to the atmosphere. Feelings over precision is what I personally go for in these images. This one was at the Cavern Club in Liverpool with the Fujifilm X70, and as you can see there's lots of noise, lots of colour noise. If you hover over the image in DXO, it'll show you the metadata. So first of all, in DXO, the main event, noise reduction. One thing that throws me off every time I use this software, and it's just a processing, saving thing, is the image that you see here isn't the final rendered image, so you can use a loop and zoom in to see the difference. And it cleans it up loads. So you just have to trust the process. Once you've done this and you've had a little pixel peep, just know that even if it doesn't look perfectly clean, when you export it, it will. If I could change one thing about DXO, it would be that. But I do understand things would probably grind to a halt because it's a very power intensive thing. Quick adjustments, I'm going to up the exposure. And my favourite thing about these photos is the beams of light. They look so cool and they match the artwork to the band's album as well. It's so clever. So I want to try and make things quite blue and teal and more stylised. As with most fun things in colour grading, it comes from your HSL sliders. So it's just a matter of boosting the blues that are already in there, so pulling up the saturation of the blues and then changing the colour of them. So if you change this wheel here, you'll see that we can make them all different kinds of colours, and what I want to do is bring it up so it's more teal. So that was where we started and this is where we're at, and already that looks really blooming cool. Here on the right hand side we have local adjustments, and if you've used sort of Lightroom or Luminar, you'll understand you just pull in different masks, like this is a gradient mask. So one thing I'm going to do just to draw your eye to the lead singer is pull down the exposure in this corner. And a top tip, if you want something to stop catching your eye in an image, the two things that you can really do to help that is pull down the highlights, so it'll really deaden the brightest parts in those shadows areas, and also pull down the saturation a little bit as well. So here's where we started and here's where we're at. A huge difference, I hope you think. What I'm going to do now is copy this as a preset, and then I can add it onto some other photos in this gig. And then when we go onto another image from this gig, this one's super duper noisy, look at the state. So you go into your presets and you find the latest one, and then bang, there we go. So when you have a bit of a pixel peep, you can see that it's really, really clear. Maybe crop in slightly, So there is the before, there is the after. Easy. One thing to understand with gig photography of all genres is sometimes the white balance will just be a bit bonkers. There's all kinds of crazy lighting in these scenarios that we don't see in other genres of photography. For instance, this band, Fit for a King, all of their artwork is bright red. So the whole stage was bright red for most of the gig. And sometimes that obviously really messes with the skin tone, so it's very hard to create a natural white balance. And red is just really hard for most cameras to pick up on, and you can lose detail. If you have a shot like this, where the skin tones can be brought back and be made relatively correct, do it. But if you have shots where you absolutely can't, just embrace it. I think everyone who's been to a gig knows that lighting can be very, very wild and creative, and if that means that everyone's bright red on stage, they were in real life, so it makes sense. And as with most genres of photography, black and white will save you bacon. I think with gig photography in particular, because we've got such a big contrast with the beams of light and the shadows of the crowd, you can get really atmospheric shots if you choose to edit in black and white. What I tend to do when I'm at the gig is use a monochrome JPEG on my camera, so I can take the JPEG straight out of camera and then edit the color ones if I want to. This was the Canon PowerShot V1, and this shot was a bit of a happy accident. I don't know if you can see in the corners, like there's a bit of motion blur where maybe I've been hit as the photo's been taken, but it sort of looks a little bit surreal to me, and I actually really like it. So I'm going to add on the preset that we just made. Just going to check the white balance, make it a little bit cooler. And then often with all presets, you just need to change your white balance and your exposure to taste, because that changes basically every photo. So that was the original. And here is the edit. I really want to play on this weird sort of vibe of this image. So I'm going to go to Nik Collection at the bottom, and I'm going to open it in analog effects. There's a lot of cool stuff in here, and it's ideal for gig photography actually. So here you can see the noise reduction is looking great, and you can see all the mad blur around the edges of the image because I've just kind of been hit. So there's loads of cool stuff we can do in here. If you wanted to go very, very stylized, we can do things like a chromatic shift, which looks really cool. You could maybe mask around the artist and just have it on the edge as an effect. But what I'm interested in is zoom and motion, rotate and blur. So I'm going to put the clean bit around the artist, and then we can choose the rotate strength. I love that animation. And then the zoom strength. Yeah, I think that looks really cool. So your eye just knows exactly where to go, and that looks really, really interesting and compelling to me. You know, you could go really mad and make it super duper swirly, but we want it to be somewhat believable, but also quite surreal and stylized. So that was the original, and this is what we've got now. So this is one that I love, that's super vibes, because it's just a silhouette. It was exposed completely wrong, and the only way that we can use this is creatively. If we try and pull the detail back, it ain't gonna work. And look how noisy this is. So let's do the preset again. Yeah, I think that looks really cool. Easy, easy edit. So here is an example of when you'll never be able to pull back the skin tones, and you're just gonna have to deal with the crazy lighting. So I'm gonna just do some noise reduction. And you can tweak this to taste, but honestly, all of the stuff that it does straight out of the box is usually really, really good. And now, once you've got the noise reduction, you've got much more confidence in raising the shadows and the exposure without pulling up all this horrible noise. This was taken on the LX15. I was shooting this at quite a high shutter speed because the bassist jumps around like a crazy person and is really cool. A bit more emphasis on the crowd. Nice big brush. Just over the crowd surfer. We can raise the shadows and raise the exposure. And then I'm just going to crop it in a little bit. Because the story is, the band is there, there's a crowd surfer heading towards them. Easy peasy. That was the original. And this is the edit. So what about camera settings? Well, I think shutter speed is your absolute king when it comes to this style of photography. As I have hopefully demonstrated in this video, you can pull back a noisy image, but you cannot pull back a blurry subject. So as long as your subject is sharp and in focus, the rest we can sort of deal with later. I like to shoot at around 250th of a second if the band or myself is moving a lot and being rowdy. If it's more of a slow song, you can knock it right down. If there's people jumping, like Fit for a King, the bassist loves to spin his bass guitar around, then I go all the way up to like 500th of a second just to try and get that motion in place. I've just realised I've got spray paint on my finger. I'll show you what I'm doing in my office. It's quite cool. I've spray painted my IKEA board brown to match the office and it looks really nice. Anyway, because I'm a short ass, I have to just put my camera up as high as I can and just hope for the best. I would consider this a lot of spraying and praying, which is why I really don't care if my camera has an EVF or not for this particular genre of photography. Get a high vantage point and just try and experiment. This is also why a wider lens is really handy, because you're more likely to get a good composition than if you're really zoomed in. Expect a lot of bad shots, like comedically bad shots, but the odd one that you do get will be worth it. And perhaps the most important tip, we're here to enjoy live music at the end of the day, and we're not here to be a nuisance to anybody else as well, so don't let your photography take over the gig. What I like to do is, like, if a song comes on that I know, and say the breakdown is really powerful, I'll just watch the song and be a participant until the middle, and then I'll put my camera out for those 30 seconds and then put it back down. This means that you can enjoy the day and be present, it means you're not annoying anyone around you, and it means that your camera's probably safer as well, because it's not on and maybe in your pocket for most of the gig. And speaking of safety, wrist strap. If you get knocked and it gets on the floor, particularly if you're in like quite a crowded sort of crowd, like a metal gig, you ain't finding the camera again. So definitely wrist strap, not neck strap. I don't think that would be safe in a mosh pit. And also, I want to add, you don't have to be a stinky metalhead like me. This works for indie bands, pop bands, anything. Do adhere to the rules. If it says that you don't bring cameras in, don't bring cameras in. We're not here to annoy anyone. We're just here to have some informal fun with our tiny cameras. DXO currently have a Father's Day sale, so I have a specific code which can help you get some extra money off, which I'll link in the description. After the sale period, I'll just put like a normal link to DXO, so it'll still work either way. But if you are interested in any of their software, there is a sale on currently if you're watching this video in the first week or two. So I hope you found this video helpful. There's links to DXO in the description if you'd like to learn more. And if you do concert photography yourself, share your best tips below.